Do you think Mexico is better than Canada? Not just to visit, but to live in too? I ran a poll right here on YouTube. 423 people voted, and 74% of them said they rather live in Mexico. That shocked me a little bit, but maybe it shouldn't have. The thing is that I've been in Mexico for 2 years now, it's coming up to 2 years. And since moving here, so many Mexicans have asked me and my wife why we chose Mexico over Canada. And a lot of them were surprised. It's almost like we traded safety up north for south of the border chaos. But here's the thing, after living here for 2 years, I don't see Mexico as chaos, not even close. So I made this video right here, not to convince you, but to show you what I see. By the end, you can decide for yourself. Here are 10 reasons why, to me, Mexico might actually be better than Canada. Number one, Mexico's weather beats Canada's cold weather. Now, I know. This is a typical answer. That's why I put it for number one, just to get it over with. But it's on the list for a reason. It deserves to be on this list. It's the biggest reason why a lot of people would choose Mexico over Canada, actually. And quite a few people said the exact same thing in the poll, in the comment section. The thing is, though, is that everyone thinks Mexico is hot, really hot everywhere. But that's not true. Mexico has almost every kind of weather that you can find all around the world. There are warm beaches, cool mountain towns, and spring-like cities that stay nice all year round. In Mexico City, where I am right now, the city is high up in altitude. So the days feel warm and the nights stay cool. The average daytime round temperature, like how warm it is in the daytime, here on average is 23.5 degrees Celsius, which is about 74.3 Fahrenheit for our friends from the United States. Just so you understand. We all know that Canada gets cold in the winter, but that's not the hardest part. I don't think that's the hardest part at all. For me, the hardest part was the lack of sunlight. In the winter in Canada, the sun sets really early. Like in Toronto, it was like 4 p.m. And if the more you go north, the earlier it sets at its peak darkness in dead of winter. And it rises really late also. Some cities only see 8 or 9 hours of daylight. That lack of light can make people feel tired or sad. And doctors even have a name for this thing, this sadness: seasonal affective disorder. And I know this disorder very well because I used to get it pretty much every winter as an adult. As a kid, you kind of have fun in the wintertime, but as an adult, I was feeling the pain, feeling the depression by the end of the winter. It was just tiring. In Mexico, the light never hides. You wake up to color and warmth almost every day, depending on where you live, really. Especially in Mexico City, I think the weather is almost perfect. Almost perfect. Number two, why living in Mexico can feel safer than living in Canada's biggest cities and even some of the smaller towns too. Many people say that Canada is safe and Mexico is dangerous. That's the story everybody hears. The truth is different. Yeah, some parts of Mexico are risky, but most cities are calm and friendly, actually. Walk around Merida or Querétaro, and you'll see kids playing, people eating, and families just hanging outside at nighttime. Canada's biggest cities have their own problems, especially at night. Downtown Toronto and Vancouver struggle with open drug use and a lot of homeless people. And a lot of times those homeless people aren't in the right mind frame. I've seen things. Before moving to Mexico, I actually was doing Uber Eats to make a little bit of extra money. And I was downtown Toronto and some woman had a samurai sword to another woman's neck on the street, in the middle of the street. I have not seen anything like that here in Mexico City. And I've seen a lot of other things in Toronto happen. I mean, I lived there for 38 years, but I've seen a lot of things, maybe more than one person should see. And in these cities in Canada, police reports show rising theft and assaults in these cities, even. In many Mexican cities, many neighborhoods feel safer, especially at night. Like, honestly, I'm a big guy, I can handle myself. I don't want to, but in Toronto, there were some iffy moments where I wasn't sure if I should have been there or not. Like that incident with the samurai sword. Luckily, someone came out onto the street with a metal chair and scared that person away. But who knows what could have happened? The news says that Canada is calm. The streets tell a different story. And trust me, I've seen some really crazy stuff in Toronto in the past. Like I said, crazy stuff. It's for another video. Number three, Mexico's cost of living wins over Canada's big economy. Now, this topic stirs up debate, depending on what circle you're talking and who you're talking to. Some people say foreigners move to Mexico, prices go up, and locals get hurt. And that's fair to talk about because it does happen in some areas. It's a very complicated situation, but maybe that's for another video. If you want to hear about that, let me know in the comments, and maybe in the future I'll make a video about it. But still, when you look at the numbers, Mexico gives people more value for their money. Canada looks richer on paper. The average worker earns more money than the average worker in Mexico. The problem is what everything costs. Houses, food, rent, and bills all eat up most of a paycheck in Canada. It's really out of control there. And Canadians are in deep debt. 60% of Canadians are in debt, and the average debt owed is $75,000. That's quite a bit of money. And experts say that much of Canada's wealth comes from home prices, not real income, which means that the average net worth of a Canadian comes from how much their house is worth. This money isn't liquid. This is how crazy it is. House value has grown about 7 times faster than Canada's job wages since 1980. That means people look rich, but a lot of them owe a lot too. Like a lot of them are in debt. In Mexico, pay is lower, but life costs far less. Rent and groceries can cost half of what they do in Canada. Half. People here feel freer because their money goes further. A big paycheck means nothing if you spend it all just to survive. And a lot of people are doing that in Canada. I feel like in Mexico, you can live instead of struggle. But maybe that's just me. Number four, making friends is easier in Mexico than Canada. People say that Canadians are the friendliest in the world. And I think that's not real. We smile, we say sorry, we hold doors. But really, when we do say sorry, it's more like excuse me and pardon me. We just use that instead, So we're not as polite as you think we are. And being polite isn't the same as being close. Many people who move to big Canadian cities say it's hard to make real friends. And I can vouch for that. There's been times where me being from Toronto, trying to make new friends in Toronto, it was really hard unless they were like foreign students, like people that came from different countries to come for school. Those people always seemed more outgoing. So I made more friends with those types of people instead of Canadian citizens that were born in Canada or in Toronto or wherever. It just seemed like everyone's too busy and everyone stays in their own world. In Mexico, friendships feel different. People actually say hello and wave to you in the neighborhood. Strangers talk. People invite you for food even if they just met you. I mean, people are inviting me for food even on the internet just because they like my videos. Canadians don't say these things. At least I haven't met one that said these things. They have to kind of know you really well before they invite you over most of the time. And social life happens in the open, in parks and markets and town squares here in Mexico. It feels like the culture values connection more than distance or isolation. And in Canada, it's completely distance and isolation. Studies show that Mexico ranks high in happiness and community trust. Canadians mean well. We're not horrible people, but their daily lives are more private and quiet than Mexicans. It feels like in Canada, you meet people sometimes, and in Mexico, when you meet people, you actually meet family, if that makes any sense. Number five, Canada's drug problem makes Mexico look calm. Most people think Mexico is the center of the drug problem. They picture cartels and danger, which, I mean, from movies and TV shows, that's what you'd think Mexico was made of, right? But that story is old news. We're breaking this here and now and in my other videos. That's not what Mexico's about. But today, many Canadian cities and towns are the ones struggling the most with drugs. Streets in places like Vancouver, Toronto, and Edmonton show the truth. Open drug use, needles, people in crisis, and they're all living downtown in the open. Like people need help, and it seems like nobody's willing to help them. Canada's drug deaths have risen fast. Over 42,000 people have died of drug overdose since 2016. And I know personally too many people that have died from it. Actually, one of my best friends died back in 2012 because of opioid use. And it's super sad. I still miss him till this day. But he's not the only one that I know that has lost their life to this, or families like have been torn apart because of this problem. Fentanyl and other opiates now reach nearly every city in Canada. In Mexico, drug use does exist, but it's far less visible in public spaces. Mexico has the problem with trafficking, but it's not the same level of open addiction seen on many Canadian streets. Now, see, Mexican towns, a lot of them are focused on family and community, which helps protect young people from falling into addiction. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to raise our child in Mexico. Because knowing so many people that lost their lives, it's scary to think if your child grows up in a place where drugs are prevalent, that they could one day fall into that trap. And I want to try to keep my son away from that trap as much as possible. Now, I mean, you can also teach them right and wrong and about addiction at a young age, but you never know. This leads me into my next point, number six, why Mexico can feel safer for families than Canadian streets. Now, a lot of people say that Mexico's dangerous. That's what you hear a lot from a lot of different people from around the world. They picture crime, cartels, and chaos. Yet many Mexican neighborhoods can feel calm and family run, really. Kids actually play in the streets here, outside. They play outside here, which is refreshing to see. Then you look at big cities in Canada, and it doesn't always feel safe there anymore. Doesn't feel like you can let your kid outside to play. Like I said previously, the drug problem is a big problem, and it could create a lot of unsafe environments and situations. But there's more to this in Canada. There's more problems than this in Canada. Police in Ontario even told people to leave their front doors unlocked at night, so thieves won't smash in windows or kick down doors to get your keys to steal your car or truck. The street that I used to live on, not too long ago, there was this new house that got built, and they have these big windows in the front. It was a big house, and they have these big windows in the front, and their front door was basically a window. And thieves tried to, they took a brick, they didn't even try. They took a brick and threw through the front door to steal a vehicle of theirs. Now they stole a pickup truck instead of their, what was it, a Lamborghini SUV. I don't know what it's called, but a Lamborghini SUV. So they stole the pickup truck and they took it. But what I'm saying is police are telling people to leave their door unlocked because this crime is building. And Mexico has crime too, but in many places, families can still walk safely at night and not worry about someone throwing a brick through your window just to get your car keys. Strong community ties and family culture keeps neighborhoods alert and connected here in Mexico. It just seems like in Canada, the desperation of the people is starting to show, starting to really show. And it doesn't seem like there's an end to this desperation anytime soon. I just think it's going to get worse. Things are going to get more expensive, and more people are going to just need to get money to either feed themselves or feed their drug addictions. Hopefully, it doesn't get to that point. Hopefully, it doesn't get a lot worse to the point where I think it is going to be, like how bad it's going to be, but we'll see. Number seven, schools in Mexico compete with Canada's for less money. People often say that Canada has the best schools in North America. That sounds true until you see what's happening in Mexico. Mexico has some decent public schools, but a really fast growing number of private schools and international ones too. Families can find English programs, bilingual education, and world class universities here, often at a fraction of a cost of Canadian private schools or international schools. And generally in Canada, good schools are tied to expensive neighborhoods. That means you pay higher rent or taxes to get your child into a better school, which, costs more, right? Costs a lot more to live in those neighborhoods. In Mexico, private education, and it's really good education, is more affordable. A high quality international school can cost less than half of what it does in Canada. Mexico also graduates more engineers per capita than many developed nations. This shows that Mexico has a strong technical education, like they have a strong base in it. So don't underestimate schools here because there are some really good ones. Number 8, healthcare in Mexico can be faster and better than Canada's. Canada's healthcare is famous for being free. And it is. I mean, it's not really. You pay we pay a lot of taxes in Canada to pay for the healthcare. But that sounds amazing. Free sounds really amazing until you need something fast. I mean, just look at the ER. If you're going to go to the emergency room and say you broke an arm or something that's not quite serious, you can wait there. I mean, I've waited there for 6 to 8 hours sometimes. And many Canadians wait weeks or months to see a doctor for a specific surgery. Some Canadians, when they have money, they even travel to the US or Mexico for quicker care and sometimes better care. The system in Canada does help everybody. They don't turn people away, but the speed is a serious problem in a lot of cases. In Mexico, healthcare is mixed. Public's for citizens and private for anyone who wants the faster service. And private hospitals in big cities like Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Mexico City are modern, clean, and are like five-star hotels. We had our son in a private hospital here in Mexico City, and it was nicer than many hotels I've ever stayed in. And the food was amazing. Canada, the food, don't expect food to be any good. I don't know if it's stepped up its game because I haven't had hospital food in Canada in a long time, but not this was a gourmet meal. And the care was on another level. And doctors aren't these cereal box doctors where they get their degree in a cereal box, you know? They're real doctors that train in the US or even sometimes Europe. And the cost here in Mexico is a lot lower compared to the US. Like a major surgery in Mexico can be a lot cheaper than in the US, even at a top tier hospital. Number 9, life in Mexico feels richer, louder, and more alive than Canada. Life in Canada feels quiet and boring, and it's always say it's sterile. People work, drive home, and stay inside. Cities look clean but often feel cold. And it's not just from the weather. It's kind of cold from the energy, from the people. It's kind of boring. In Mexico, life spills into the streets. Music plays, food cooks, people talk, and families gather late into the night. And it's almost like every day feels like something is going on, or at least you can find something going on. To me, Mexico's culture feels like you're celebrating being alive. The food isn't rushed, conversations last hours. There's local markets, street food, and festivals all year round. And even small towns have their own color and noise that pulls people together. Surveys show that Mexico ranks higher in life satisfaction and social connection, way more than many other rich nations. Number 10, Mexico's future feels more exciting than Canada's stability. People say that Canada is stable and safe for the long haul. That's true in many ways, but it seems like that system is kind of falling apart. But we'll see what happens. Life there does move slow and steady. The problem is, you also start to feel stuck. High housing prices, heavy taxes, and slow growth make it hard for people to move ahead. Like it's really hard to get ahead. Stability can start to feel like you're standing still. Mexico's energy feels different. Its economy is growing fast through manufacturing, tech, and tourism. Big global companies are opening factories here because of nearshoring to the USA. That's bringing production closer to the US than places like India or China. Young workers are building businesses, coding apps, and exporting products worldwide. Mexico's population is younger and more active, and that's with the drive that gives the country momentum. Canada, by contrast, is aging fast, and it's really just slowing down, not speeding up like Mexico. If you made it this far, you must have liked this video. And I have other ones like this one. This one's called 20 Ways to Annoy Mexicans in Mexico if you're an American. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. So click it, and I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.